call the July 15th, 2026 meeting of the Transportation Commission to order. Ariana, if you could please read the instructions.
Welcome to our virtual meeting. We're going to cover a few basic items before beginning. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. To members and city staff members, if you're able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you're able, please activate your video when you are speaking. Use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak or ask questions. Staff, click raise hand when you're asked a question. The chair will do their best to call on committee members in the order in which hands are raised, and lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up, and after speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the commission, please send it to the email listed on today's agenda. Chair, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Ariana. Aiden, if you could call a roll, please.
Sure thing. William Olkovich. Sean O'Brien.
Present.
Derek Field.
Here.
Barbara Harrington McKinney. Ann Kovich.
Here.
Robbie Weber.
Here.
Pepe Barros.
Here.
Chris McCahill.
Here.
Bill Bremer.
Here.
Harold Cleams.
Here.
Lynn Olson.
Present.
And Denise Jess.
She's excused.
Okay.
Okay. Lynn, you can make motions and vote this evening. With the people who are not here, you are able to do that. So did everybody have a chance to look at the minutes from the last meeting? Bill?
I'll make a motion for approval of the minutes from the last meeting.
Okay, thank you. There's a motion, Alder O'Brien.
Second.
So motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, seeing no hands, I'm going to assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes to vote no or abstain. If so, please raise your hand. Okay, motion's carried unanimously. Do we have any public comment under item 1 this evening, Aiden?
We do not, no.
Okay. How about any disclosures or recusals this evening? Okay, seeing no hands. We have one item proposed for the consent agenda. Do we have anybody registered to speak on that item, Aiden?
We do.
Okay, so we will pull it off the consent agenda. Christoph, I don't know if you want to make just some brief comments. I thought I saw Christoph here.
Yep, I'm here.
Yeah, good.
We are now bringing the jurisdictional transfer with WSDOT we had previously briefed this body on, and there's been no substantive change since that briefing other than that we are proposing creating a dedicated transportation fund to place the $37 million payment from WSDOT in and setting aside $15 million of that for the Park Street / North-South BRT project. Other than that, this is what we had discussed last time. So I'm happy to answer questions. I'm also happy to redo the presentation, but it is basically the content everybody has already seen.
Sure, I personally don't think that's necessary, but we can certainly hear from the commissioners. Why don't we hear from the public first, and then we'll go to any questions, or if anybody has a desire to look at any particular slide or so in the presentation.
So first we have Nicholas Davies of Richard Street, supports and wishes to speak.
Yeah, I'll keep it brief. I figured I would just
register and speak my support for this since I was planning to be at the meeting for other items as well. I think it's a good deal and look forward to seeing it going forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Does anybody have a question for the registrant? Okay, thanks so much for coming in and sharing your thoughts. It looks like we have someone else too, Aiden.
Yes, next we have Sadiqa Deshazer of Forest Run Court, poses and wishes to speak.
Go ahead, you have 3 minutes.
I just had to get unmuted. Can
Sure.
you hear me?
We can.
Fantastic. Good evening. My name is Sadiqa from District 17. I regularly navigate the city by bus, by bike, by car. I take whatever means of transit, depending on what's accessible to me. When the new BRT system came into place, it's added time to my route to the point that it's almost always faster to take my bike. It's almost always faster to take my car. When I talked to Metro, I was informed for the route that I was along that it cost $100,000 for a bus and a route. And that's something that they didn't have the money to do at the time. Tonight, we're reviewing the legislative file to absorb state highways. The city's presentation removed East Washington through a second agreement because of the heavy liability, but we're going to take on John Nolan and Park, which also are going to have liabilities over the next decades. The resolution mandates a $37 million payout. 15 million of that immediately goes to the BRT. That leaves just 22 million. Additionally, over 30 years, we're losing $300,000 a year. So that's $9 million in supportive payments that they give us. At the same time, on page 59 of the Vision Zero report, it shows that choking local streets simply displaces high-speed traffic. We've had a 166.7% spike in fatal crashes on the regional corridors, which are the ones that I take to get to work because of all the transit changes that have happened downtown and the inefficiencies. So we're pushing more and more traffic, more and more high speeds onto these regional corridors. And at the same time, right now, the city's facing an 11 million operating deficit for this fall. They're requesting 2% cuts across the board. So we're voluntarily accepting massive liabilities with 22 million in the bank that's being reserved for this, but it's not actually specifically lined out. What I was told when I went to the Board of Public Works is that each time they go to use these funds, we'll have a meeting about it and I can petition it then. I will. Also, they can mark 15 million for the BRT system. It seems reasonable that things could be marked intentionally, specifically with a line item for maintenance. Things could be marked specifically with the recognition that we're going to need all of that money going into these streets. When we talk about 30 years on repairing these streets, there's a reason we left out East Washington. John Nolan right now, our current expenditure for the project is tens of millions. So we're basically going to be voting in something that at some point we're going to need more money for. And I would like to actually see planning done ahead. Again, I take all forms of transit throughout the city to get to where I'm going. That being said, I would love to see an efficient system. That's not what we have. I also don't appreciate that we're saying that we're reducing deaths when in reality, we're just pushing them to other areas of the city. So I would like to see more, and I think we should say no until we actually have more marked in how this money is going to be used and making sure that there's actually a 30-year, multi-decade report that says how we're actually going to cover these costs. And when we get the 10-year money increase access to the grants, that's only percentages. We're still going to have to pay in and match the funds as well as compete for the money. So I don't think this has been fully fiscally worked out in a public way, at least not that I've been able to see when I've attended meetings or read through minutes. So I'm requesting you guys advise the council to vote no until more is done, or vote no, period.
Thanks for coming and sharing your thoughts. Does anybody have a question for the registrant? Okay, seeing no hands. Again, thanks for coming and sharing your thoughts. Aiden, do we have anybody else registered to speak?
We did have one more registrant, Gabriel Hill of Presidential Lane, supports and wish to speak, but I don't see them in the attendees list right now.
I don't either. Okay, thanks for letting us know that. Okay, so comments or questions for Christoph with regard to this item? Alder Okovich, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Christoph, I was wondering if you, for the segregated fund that the WISDOT money would go into, can that be used for both capital and operating expenses or just capital expenses?
Capital or operating.
Okay.
And that is in the resolution.
Okay. Other comments or questions for Christoph? Okay, is there any further comments? I'm looking for a motion. Carl,
I move approval of the proposal.
okay. So move approval to recommend to the council.
Correct.
Alder O'Brien.
I'll second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to approve the resolution and recommend it to the council. Any discussion? Did I say that okay, Carl?
Yep.
Okay. Any discussion? We have discussed this before, which is why it was on the consent agenda. Okay, seeing no hands. I am going to assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes to vote no or abstain. If so, please raise your hand. Okay, the motion is carried unanimously. Thanks so much. Okay, let's move on to item 3, which is Parmans Terrace. Ashley, am I saying that correctly?
Yes.
Okay, I'm glad. All right. I believe you're going to present. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm here to present the construction project on Parmans Terrace. Let me share my screen. Can everybody see it?
Yes.
Yes. Parmans, it's located west of Madison, and the limits are going to be Parmans Terrace from O'Dana Road down to the cul-de-sac. The small section on Council Crest is because we're gonna be extending the water main with a new connection from Parmans Terrace to Council Crest. And the dashed line shown is we are gonna be installing sidewalk south of O'Dana Road from Parmans Terrace to Anthony Lane. For mirroring purpose, the project already has done a field visit with forestry and the city design team and a public involvement meeting last week. I'm here to inform the Commission regarding this upcoming project, the street layout alternative, and to gain feedback for approval from the Commission on preferred design alternatives. Continuing with Complete Green Street, Parmans Terrace as an assistant right now is classified as a neighborhood street. This is for wider neighborhoods with higher traffic and transit routes and allows both vehicles to pass each other without stopping. Parmans has an assistant street width of 28 feet from face of curb to face of curb with parking on both sides that can typically allow traffic to pass both ways slowly. With this project, we're proposing to change the street type to a neighborhood yield street. This is for older neighborhoods fall in this street type, and they allow parking only on one side of the street, and both vehicles cannot pass each other. One must always give way when parked vehicles are present, providing a traffic calming effect. As mentioned, we're changing the street type from a neighborhood street to a neighborhood yield street. And by the complete greens table, the requirements are going to be a minimum of travel way of 14 feet. This is going to be to the edge of pavement on both sides. We're maintaining narrow street width if no parking is going to be provided. A typical and a maximum travel way width, it's going to be 16 feet to the edge of pavement, allowing parking on one side. And if parking is going to be allowed, 2 vehicles cannot pass in both directions without one given way. And with flex zones for a neighborhood yield street is from 10 feet to 17 feet. This may include curb and gutter, terrace, trees, sidewalk, street parking if present. And in some constrained cases, a terrace can be as low as 3 feet if it's necessary. With the proposed street design alternatives that were considered, design A is for a street width of 17 feet from face of curb to face of curb, with a 3-foot terrace and a 5-foot sidewalk on the east side. This is going to be in front of the trees. We're gonna be replacing driveway aprons, maintain trees in the right-of-way, and having a narrow street for traffic calming. This sidewalk for this design is going to be maintained by residents, and the existing parking on both sides will be removed, giving a travel way of 13 feet for the street. This typical section is going to be seen as from the cul-de-sac to Odana Road. And the street right now has a right-of-way of 49.5 feet. Continuing with design B, this is for a street width of 20 feet from face of curb to face of curb, with a 6-foot sidewalk installed on the east side of the street in front of the trees. Also, we're gonna be replacing driveway aprons with the design, maintain trees in the right-of-way, give strict traffic calming with a narrow street. And for this design also, the sidewalk is going to be maintained by residents. And the existing parking will be modified to only one side, given a flex zone as shown on the typical section of 8.5 feet. This will be 6 foot for street parking and 2.5 for the curb. A traveled way of 10 feet, meaning both vehicles cannot pass along each other without one given way. And the other flex zone of 8.5 will be for the curb and gutter and the sidewalk that's gonna be placed. And design C is a street width for 20 feet from face of curb to the flow line, having a 5-foot sidewalk on the street level on the east side in front of trees, replacing driveway aprons, maintaining the trees in the right-of-way, having traffic calming by having a narrow street, and sidewalk is going to be maintained by city engineering. Currently, city engineering staff plows the southwest commuter path that is south of Parment Terrace, connecting with the street. And with this design, as the sidewalk is going to be street level, they're going to continue plowing up to the Odana intersection. And the assistant parking will be modified to one side only, having, again, a flex zone on the left side of 8.5 with the 6-foot parking and the 2.5 curb and gutter, a travel way of 11. And the flex zone of 7.5 is going to be a 2-foot curb and gutter alley, a sidewalk street level, and a sidewalk curb before all the trees are right now. On the street, it's for Parmen Terrace. We're gonna be replacing the asphalt pavement, the gravel base, and driveway aprons. The street design with this construction will include new sidewalk. And for Odana, we're gonna be replacing the driveway aprons, and the construction will have a new sidewalk on the south side from Parmen Terrace to Anthony Lane. And this section of the sidewalk is gonna be maintained by residents. And something I forgot to mention is that Design C is gonna be our city staff recommendation for tonight. Oh, sorry, I think you're mute. And
I am, thank you.
yes.
I try and mute just in case. If that's your presentation then, Ashley?
Yeah, sorry, yes.
Okay. Okay, great. Do we have anybody registered to speak on this item, Aiden?
We do. We have a couple people.
Okay. So we'll hear from the public, and then we'll go to commissioners and other alders for comments or questions.
So first we have Nicholas Davies of Richard Street, opposes and wishes to speak.
Thank you. To be clear, options A and B look fine. And if those were the options presented or even recommended, then I wouldn't be bothering to speak tonight. My concern is with option C. A sidewalk at street level is not a sidewalk at all. A sidewalk that cars can conveniently drive and park on is not a sidewalk. So from an ADA perspective, from a complete green streets perspective, this should not have been on the table in the first place. Snow plowing does not clear snow to a pedestrian sidewalk standard. It's often a couple inches of slush or groomed snow when the plow has gone by, or a layer of thick ice. And that's going to completely erase any visual distinction between this pedestrian space and versus vehicle space. And so you are going to get drivers driving on the pedestrian space, shall we say, or parking on the pedestrian space because they won't know any different, I'm also concerned that 27 feet from curb to curb contradicts and negates the neighborhood yield street designation, because that is going to be plenty of space for cars to pass each other at speed. So I'm finding it hard not to resent the fact that we are being put in this position of having to relitigate, what a sidewalk even is. I think this would be a very bad precedent to establish, on future reconstructions where, homeowners don't want to maintain the sidewalk. Maybe they would otherwise oppose adding sidewalk. They would probably see this no sidewalk option as very appealing. So I would not want this to be an option here, and I don't think it should be an option anywhere, frankly. I think I'll wrap up there. Thank you.
Thanks for coming and sharing your thoughts. Does anybody have a question for the registrant? Okay, seeing no hands, thanks for coming and sharing your thoughts. Aiden, do we have anybody else?
Yes. Next we have Gabriel Hill of Presidential Lane, supports, and wishes to speak?
Hello, can you hear me okay?
We can, thanks.
I'm at work, so I can't be long, but I'm just going to mirror what Nicholas said. I mean, C just seems like a complete like abdication of like our complete Green Streets guide. Like, again, we spend months like making this document and then we don't use it for the Regent Street redesign. And like, honestly, this street, it's a cul-de-sac. So it doesn't really, for me, I don't really care all that much because you're not going to have the high speed cars. But like, it just seems like city staff is abdicating their responsibility to design safe streets. I mean, again, as Nicholas said, this street is just wider than anything that we have established as good design practice. All engineering and safety, like studies from like the modern era, says we should not be building streets like this. And option A just seems like objectively the best option. The street is never parked up. There's plenty of room in people's driveways. Like, it just, I don't understand what we're doing even here if we choose option C. Like, it just seems like we're just rubber stamping like the same old design that we've seen like for decades that we know kills people. So it's disappointing to see if we do pick C. And I mean, I'll continue to call in, but like when we have options like this, but it's just, we shouldn't, as Nicholas said, like people shouldn't have to call in to say, this isn't what we want because it's killing people. Thank you. And I can't take questions. I might have marked that I can, but I can't because again, I'm at work.
Okay.
Have a good one.
Thanks. We appreciate you coming and sharing your thoughts. Thanks so much. Do we have anybody else who's registered to speak on this, Aiden?
Nope, not under this item.
Okay. All right. Thanks everybody for coming and sharing your thoughts, comments, or questions. Robbie, go ahead.
Yeah. I just want to clarify on option C. It says 20 feet from face of curb to flow line. Could you define what flow line is?
Sure, and I can give it here. Flow line will be where the water is gonna be passing on the curb. Let's say if it's a typical curb, will be the face of curb. But because this is gonna be an alley curb, it's roll curb, so we don't have a full curb head. It's gonna be the center of the curb where all the water is gonna be pulling.
So is that between the travel way and the sidewalk? Or is it between the sidewalk and somebody's yard?
All right, the curb?
Yeah,
Robbie, flow line.
It's between the sidewalk and the edge of pavement.
Okay.
So it'll be a alley curb with the concrete sidewalk between that curb and the people's houses on the east side.
Okay. So it's the travel way for cars and parking is 20 feet. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So that was my first question. Just to clarify so that I understand. And then you said it's a rolled curb and then a sidewalk?
It's a alley. So it's an alley curb. So it just has a gutter. So it's two pieces, concrete on each edge of the curb. It tapers to the middle for a flow line.
Okay. Okay. I'm just trying to sort of picture what it looks like for someone using the street in any capacity. So that's why I'm asking, so that I understand what it looks like to people who are using it. So my second question is, what is the rationale for option C versus option A or B?
So early in the planning, we talked to Kevin Lickey, the head bike administrator, and the city engineer about the street, its uses, how we want to apply the hierarchy. We did hear from Kevin that there is some parking for people that want to access the trail. They might park towards the cul-de-sac. We can't put the sidewalk behind the trees, between the trees and the houses, because we don't have enough right of way, and the sidewalk would be too close to the trees. So we had to either not put a sidewalk in or put it in the street. So the thought is that if we were going to option C, we would be able to run the plow that's coming up from the path, and then they would just plow that separate from the street. It's not a road plow. It'd be maybe a Jeep coming up from the path, and it would go to up to Odano Road, and that they would be able to plow that, and then it'd be easier instead of I think option A has the really small terrace, and then option B, really has no terrace and a wide sidewalk. So then when the city plow comes through, it would just pile all of that snow on the 6-foot sidewalk and be really hard to maintain. So because of everything's narrow here, we had some internal talks about kind of this idea for a while. We've kind of seen it in some other cities where there's no sidewalk. It's a cul-de-sac, low volume street, but it has a pretty significant path connection on one of the ends, that we come up with this kind of sidewalk level street design. We think it works out well on this street. We're able to kind of keep the parking on one side. We're eliminating parking on one side, keep it on one side, add a sidewalk. We can't add it to both sides. We don't think both sides is necessarily necessary because it's just a low volume street for cars. That's kind of the backstory with kind of where we came, how we got here, is discussions with Kevin Lickey, other members of traffic engineering, the city engineer. We've talked to the streets in their plowing. We've talked to entering operations and kind of how they would plow it. So we do have a consensus among all those departments that option C is a good design for this specific situation. We do have some other situations in the city where we have option B. It doesn't perform really well with kind of the snow piling up on this small sidewalk. So this was all alternative for kind of a better way to kind of maintain this sidewalk. It would be no parking on that side. The alley curb and the sidewalk would be concrete. So we would have a difference in material in the street to kind of keep that separation.
So if the plow is running up this street level sidewalk, then the snow then gets dumped into people's yards. Is that the idea?
Yep. And then there's curb on the back of that sidewalk to just like streets. It gives those trees some added protection for that, since those trees are growing over the existing curb right now.
Okay. And the parking would be on the opposite side of the street from the sidewalk.
That is correct. Yep.
Okay. And in option B, where you have parking, would it be also on the opposite side of the street from the sidewalk?
Yes.
Okay. Are we doing just questions, or are we doing discussion as well?
I'm a fan of doing both at the same time. If you because I think that's going to generate questions from other people and discussion as well.
Okay. I can't support C. I mean, it's just for the reasons that the two speakers mentioned. First of all, we just don't have that much snow these days. So deciding on a street design based on plowing doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And I just see people deciding to park on the sidewalk. It also makes the road look wider. I mean, it just makes it appear to be a wider street, which then, of course, encourages speeding. And there is so little parking on this street that I really can't imagine that we need that much pavement for people to drive on.
It'll be narrower. I know what you said, but the street will be narrower. We have to narrow it because the trees are growing over the existing curb.
Right.
I mean, we'll sign it. It would act like one side where you can't park on any other street. So that's where I'm a little bit confused on why you would think people park there if we sign it, no parking.
Well, I guess if you've got parking on the other side, maybe they'll park there. But honestly, I don't really see that much parking being used anyway. And people who want to access the path have plenty of other places to access the path. So I guess I just don't really agree with not putting in a proper sidewalk and having some separation between the sidewalk and the street.
Yeah, I mean, with option B, the only difference is there's also some curb height, and there's no separation. Really, I would say none of the options have good separation because we're just so tight in the street.
Wait a minute, let's go back because I thought there was a 3-foot terrace on option B.
Option A.
Option A has a 3-foot terrace?
Right.
Okay, and then option B has no terrace.
Could we see those in the street, in the image? Sorry for interrupting.
Yes. This will be option A, the design A. It has the 3-foot terrace, but this one is not going to have any parking on the street.
Mm-hmm.
And option B will be the 20-foot street with a 6-foot sidewalk to the back of the curb with parking on one side.
It's still all really tight. That was my only point.
Yeah. I don't like the idea of setting a precedent either. Because, when we're putting sidewalks in, a lot of homeowners whine about needing to maintain it. And, I see them saying, well, you did it on Parma Terrace. Why don't you give me the same option and you plow it? And then I don't have to deal with it. I also see them probably not being terribly thrilled with you dumping snow onto the front sidewalk and driveway that they just plowed as well, or that they just cleared. But, that's going to happen on the street, but at least it won't happen on the place that they walk up to their house. I don't know. I just can't really see maintaining, putting in a street level sidewalk just to preserve parking for, I believe there's 8 houses there, and they all have adequate off-street parking. Plus you can go over and park on Odana. If you're having a party, people can park on Odana because there is parking available on Odana, which is not used, but it is available. And it's not like it's that far away. So anyway, I'll just listen to other people's comments and see what other people have to say. Thanks.
Thanks, Robbie. Harold, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Maybe one question to start out with. So the screen that we're looking at, this is option B?
Yes.
Yes.
And is option B in the Legistar materials different? Because I'm getting some, I'm slightly, they look different. 20 feet.
Can you show us what was in the presentation, please?
Oh, sure. The dimensions are different because on the presentation, I have it as flex zone and travelway. And the overview has the dimensions of the street, the curb, the terrace, and the sidewalk.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we were trying to kind of tie this more into the, complete green streets guide to, give everyone a sense of the flex zone here on these options. Typically engineering talks face to curb, but we're trying to be a little bit more detailed with some CGS information.
Okay, yeah, which in principle I appreciate, but then yeah, it's confusing when you look at like two different sets of dimensions. I'm just trying to orient myself. Okay. And right, I mean, CGS language, shouldn't that be the walk zone? Like, I mean, wouldn't we have travelway, flex zone, and walk zone? At least in the options that actually do have a terrace. I mean, whatever, doesn't matter. Maybe, yeah, consistency with the language that's used in the CGS guide, I think for future presentations would be helpful. Big picture, right? This is a sewer project. That's what's driving the need here.
Yeah, and the pavement is pretty poor too.
Okay. And the sewer part drives the project limits. Is that right?
Yeah, from Odana to the cul-de-sac, and then water is thinking about kind of going beyond that with some old main.
Okay. Okay, well, because one thing I was going to ask, and I think somebody who submitted a comment said like they really appreciate the extension of the sidewalk along Odana. And so I was thinking there's also a sidewalk gap the other side. I know we built a new piece of sidewalk from the southwest path to the bus stop. And then from the bus stop to Parman, there's no sidewalk except for the new crossing. And then, yeah, so I was just thinking if it would make sense to close that whole gap and also build sidewalk.
Yeah, we did talk about that with Kevin Lickey, and we said that that's a less critical, it certainly is missing, yes. And filling it in would be great. That has more constraints. That's going to have tree removals, while the other block won't. And then that particular section, according to Kevin, was less critical to install at this time. And I think if you wanted to put sidewalk there, you probably got to rip out some Odana curb, maybe slide it in, but I know that affects parking in the bike lanes potentially. So we didn't get into that too much, but that's kind of the reasoning behind not including that section.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, sometimes it makes sense to expand the scope a little bit, but if it creates other issues, yeah, whatever. So I want to understand Kevin's comments a little bit better. He's not in the meeting right now. So is the thinking that the people, like with option C, is the idea that people biking between Odana and the Southwest Path would be using that street level sidewalk, or is it about walking?
I think it's more about walking. I think you could, or you could use, the streets, just, because it's a cul-de-sac. So, there's not a lot of traffic. So that was kind of our thought is either would be available.
Okay. And then the comment about parking is, I mean, my interpretation is that this is kind of like the, informal park and ride scenario where people drive up to a residential street, park there, and then bike to work or other places.
Yep. That's kind of what Kevin talked about.
Okay. All right, I think those are the questions, and I'll wait with comments until other people have had an opportunity to ask stuff. Thanks.
Thanks, Harold. Pepe, go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. I appreciate the, room for discussion here and asking some questions. Now, I'm wondering here about we're closing one sidewalk gap on Odana with this project. Is there any other project in the future, or what's the projection for closing the next gap on Odana?
To the west?
Yes.
Or the east?
To the east.
So that's, I believe, that's what Harold just mentioned. So as of right now, we decided to not put that in because that's more complicated. There's tree removals there. And Kevin thought that piece was less critical to put in than the piece to the west. So as of right now, there's no plan, or I'm not aware of a plan for that next piece.
Okay. And this might be trivial, but maybe, I'm asking from ignorance here. What is the logic here with, because I see the curb is going further into Odana on that east side. What does that gap look like? How does that connect with what is in place right now?
It's matching. Actually, it's matching. Is it matching what was just built? We just put a crossing in at Parman and Odana, so we're matching that. Is that accurate, Ashley?
Yes, it will be only the curb ramp that will be connecting to the new Odana sidewalk has the change because of the narrow street. But yes, we're matching that connection.
Yep. So I think the aerial in this photo is off. We've done a project at the intersection since, and that's what we're matching at.
Okay.
So on that east side.
Yes, it can be seen a little bit closer
Right.
on the exhibit.
Yeah, because also option A is different than option B and C and how that ends. So I guess I was looking at option A in my screen and I didn't see that connection.
Yes, but at the moment, the only one will be the ramp connecting to Udana that might extend a little bit with the curb ramp.
I see now. Yes, on that photo, then on the east side, it does come back. It's kind of like a curve extension into Odana, and then it swerves back into. Is that gonna? It looks like it's blocking the current bike lane.
Yeah, look in Google. I'm pretty sure it's in Google right now.
Yes, the aerial it's not up to date with the changes done there.
Yeah, I was trying to look at it on Google too to kind of make sense of that. Why the curve is just so much is way longer on the east side of the intersection, and if is that going to be built on top of the bike lane?
It appears it blocks the. We've didn't have a bump out there, so we utilized the park. You weren't going to park there anyway because it was close to the intersection, but we utilized the parking area and then stopped the curb short of the bike lane. So it does not impede, does not appear to impede the bike lane. I can't get quite a good angle on it in Google, but
okay.
I think we are using a piece of the gutter. That Odana bump out that was built, we are using a piece of the gutter as a part of the bike lane. It appears to be that. It might be 3 and 2 for 5. It might be that's maybe where we're at.
Okay, so it is going to be a little bit of a bump out, but not blocking the bike lane, just taking over what is parking right now, or just curb, probably.
Yeah, and that's there, anyway. And that's there right now. It was already built in 2025.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I didn't see it on Google, but yeah, maybe I'm just not familiar with that intersection.
In Google, it shows it.
Okay.
Almost finished with construction. Like all the barrels are out there. There's.
Okay.
So,
I'll go back and see it there then.
I have my Google person kind of in the Arm Terrace part of the intersection, I guess.
Okay. And then, yeah, I guess I have comments. I mean, Harold was also saving his comments, but I mean, Robbie already shared a little bit. I generally just agree with what Robbie said. If we're thinking of putting a sidewalk, why not just putting a standard sidewalk in the regular we're thinking? I feel like doing that street level sidewalk you can put all the signs in the world, but kind of encourages you know, driving over it, parking over it, or having other behaviors there. I'm gonna save some of the other comments for later, but yeah, just let Bill ask questions if he's got some. Thank you.
Thanks, Pepe. Bill, go ahead.
Thank you, Ann. What were the neighbors' discussions about when showing the proposed project, and what are they concerned about shoveling a sidewalk, or what are their preferences, or what are their thoughts?
We didn't get too much feedback because there isn't that many people that live on the street, and I think
was there a concern about losing parking if they didn't have parking?
We didn't go down that route. I mean, it always is. So I think we were trying to avoid, really trying to stir this project up to be controversial. So by maintaining at least one side and having some kind of pedestrian way on one side.
So that's what kind of the staff kind of threw out as a kind of preference for A.
Yeah, because we in the past have thrown out no parking, and it doesn't go well. So we were just trying to avoid some of that controversy by keeping at least one side parking. Yeah.
All right. Those are my questions. I'll wait for the discussion. Thanks.
Thanks, Bill. Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, two more questions that occurred to me. First, regarding the snow removal operation. So I think you said the idea is that the equipment that clears the Southwest Path, just takes a pass, assuming we go for option C, they would just go up to Odana, turn around and whatever. And then the street would still be plowed by separate plows?
Yep. So as our streets department would plow it as normal, as they would plow kind of the edge of the alley curb, turn around in the cul-de-sac. Likely our Southwest Path, they would come up. So they'll come up to the cul-de-sac anyway, because of that connection from Palm Terrace to the Southwest Pass, and then they said they would be okay to go all the way up to Odana. So that's kind of what we discussed.
Okay, because part of what I'm thinking in terms of operational concerns, the street plow, A would probably come later because this is not on any kind of priority route, and then with no terrace, wouldn't the street plow basically push all the snow onto that street level sidewalk, and then you have to clear that again?
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure how often our Southwest Path team would plow, or kind of how that back and forth would go. And that's something, if option she was just, if that's what we would move forward with, we would have that further discussion of, is there typical who gets there first, or does that depend on how much snow we get? If the city plow gets there first, so now it's kind of plowed even more on the sidewalk, and then our plow, pushes it to the trees, which is kind of what happens now. Or if our plow if the path plow gets there first, and then the city plow comes in and now plows that snow back onto the sidewalk, does the Southwest Path plow team come back? That we would have to have that further discussion if on some more of those details.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. And then the other question, do we have this street level sidewalk design anywhere else in the city?
I don't think we have. Well, no, actually we do. Where we talked about this. What was that street?
Yes, let me get the name real quick.
This is unique, and we are aware that it's unique. And it's something that we thought would work, as this has come up before the last few years with CGS, and some of these low volume streets and we've gotten requests from other residents, throughout the time is, hey, don't put a sidewalk in, make this, sidewalk, in the street kind of thing. And in those situations, it, didn't work. So we've been talking about this as staff, for a little bit, and 'cause it's kind of unique here. But where do we have this, Nashli?
A similar can be Cordes Court, close to the Youth Symphony Orchestra building. On the back, that little alley street has the alley curb and a small sidewalk on both sides.
For the benefit of the commission, do you mind? Can you maybe pull it up in Street View? So that just we get a flavor of what this could look like.
While you're doing that, in a few minutes, I have to jump off, and then I'm going to switch from my laptop to my cell phone. So I will jump back on to continue the conversation. Just want to let the commission know. Got to change locations.
Here it can be, this is the Symphony Orchestra building, and you can see the alley curb on both sides and a smaller sidewalk.
This looks like it's probably been in place for a long time. This does not look new.
Yeah.
I don't know if we have, I don't think we have any new versions or a new situation like this. And that's unique. And that's, and we know that. And just seeing if the commission thinks that this might be something to work on this specific situation with a path and a cul-de-sac.
Okay, thank you. Those were the two questions.
Thanks, Harold. Bill?
Did you say Will or Bill?
I said Bill. Sorry. You're next, Alder. Bill Bremer, you're muted.
Sorry, thanks. Have you had any discussions with operations with snow plowing? Have they ever pushed all the snow on a street, narrow street, to one side? In other words, the side with no sidewalk? In other words, the plow goes down one side first, plows the snow to the middle, and then comes back and plows the snow.
Yeah, I
the
think
plow goes the wrong way.
Yeah, I think in this situation, and we didn't have this detailed conversation, that they would hopefully plow the snow towards the west.
Yeah.
But if there's a car parked there, I don't know if they necessarily switch the plow to the other side or just kind of plow that car in and continue going. I
don't think it's any different than any other street where there's cars parked. So,
yeah.
But I don't, on a short street like this and low speed, I guess with their equipment, flashing lights and so forth, plowing against traffic, you could say they're plowing against, going the wrong way, but I don't see a real issue with that. So I guess that's just a thought. I don't know.
I don't know what the level of concern the commission has with, certainly a street level sidewalk with cars and pedestrians, and how often we think that conflict will arise between a car in the cul-de-sac in the street and pedestrians walking. And then specifically if there's two cars coming at each other with a parked car, we do think that situation is very low as a possibility.
I agree. On the picture that you're showing, any idea where they plow the snow? I mean, I guess the question is really the homeowners on the left side of the picture. They're responsible for this sidewalk clearing, right?
Yeah, we can ask them. We can have a more further detailed discussion if we think that C is something we want to move forward with.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to speculate.
All right, those are my questions. I'll lower my hand. Thanks.
Thanks, Alder Okovich. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I think you confirmed this. I want to double check because after seeing Curtis Court, but the design you're talking about for option C would be similar in that there would be a gutter in between the sidewalk and the street. Is that right?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay.
So 5 foot sidewalk, 2 foot gutter, or what, I can't remember exactly what the alley curb is, if it's 18 inches or 24 inches, and then the street.
Okay. I do think that helps a little bit with the visual separation, but I guess I would be curious if they've had issues on Curtis Court with people parking on the sidewalk. Because I don't think there's any parking on Curtis Court. And I know WISO there have been issues with WISO and parents basically idling. So, yeah, I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Alder. I have a question for you, Andy, before you head off or switch. If option C were not available, which would staff recommend, A or B?
That's a good question. I think with A, there's no parking, so there's not any additional traffic calming there. Nationally, do we have parking in B? I can't remember.
Yes, will
On
be
one side.
parking on one side.
Yep. So then I think for some traffic calming purposes, and I could go A or B. I guess I would lean towards B, meaning there's some traffic calming there with cars, but then it's a little bit less ideal, for maintenance for the residents there with the 6-foot sidewalk right against the curb. But I think I would tend to lean towards B.
Okay, thanks. Other comments, other questions for staff? Harold?
One more. Would it make sense to flip the street parking and the travel way in option B? Was there a reason to not do that? So like have the cars parked against the sidewalk?
Can we go back to see that, Ashley?
Sure. Where do I have? Here it is. I can say I can have further discussions with T on placement for street parking with this design.
Okay. Yeah, I was just, it's just a little parking utilization. That part doesn't really matter. I was just thinking if you don't have a terrace as a separator between the travel lane and the sidewalk, it might be nice to get a little buffer through parking, but yeah, I'm not sure it really matters. All right, thanks.
Thanks, Harold. One observation that I would make, I live just off Moreland Road, and there's this really strange stretch of Moreland Road where there's a 3-foot terrace. For some bizarre reason, the terrace narrows down to 3 feet. And because the traffic is really, really heavy and goes very fast on Moreland Road, it doesn't feel safe. But I would think in this situation that a 3-foot terrace would be kind of a nice separation to have for the snow plowing reasons, and also for the, feeling as a pedestrian, feeling that you have that separation. So I just wanted to make that observation. Robbie, go ahead.
I certainly understand that too.
Mm-hmm. This is probably not something that can be answered by the engineering department or even traffic engineering, but I just think that if we are going to, if we go with option C and the city is going to be plowing that sidewalk, and then possibly a street plow comes and dumps more snow on, and then maybe the people from the Southwest Path don't get back in time, or they've got other responsibilities. I think that we need to make it clear to the homeowners that regardless of who does the first pass, they are still responsible for making sure the sidewalk is clear, salted, clear, safe. And that's a building inspection issue, but I do not in any way want homeowners to suddenly think they are not responsible for making sure there is a safe walking environment in front of their house, regardless of which option we choose. So that's just that's something that I think that when this project is done, regardless of what is installed, that needs to be made clear so that they're not pointing the finger at somebody else that they dump snow on and they aren't gonna go out and clear it themselves. Thanks.
Thanks, Robbie. Chris, go ahead.
I'm getting the sense that we're into comments now, so I'm just going to assume that.
Sure, go
I'm
ahead.
in favor
Yep.
of alternative B. I think it's a reasonable solution in this case. We're not talking about limited space where there's lots of trade-offs. We're not talking about a major thoroughfare with speeding and safety issues. So I think narrowing the street, preserving some parking, and creating a sidewalk makes perfect sense here. It seems sort of like a no-brainer to me. I appreciate staff putting forward alternative C, and I'm not as like vehemently as opposed to it as some people seem to be. I think we've got a lot of small, short residential streets where creative design solutions are warranted, including having sidewalks at street level, especially in really narrow, tiny cases. I think that the problem here is that if we were to do that, it should probably be a neighborhood shared street type of design, where instead of saying there's a sidewalk here, but it's at street level, instead we're signaling that this is a shared space where there are people walking and driving, and design it that way. So I would like to see more designs like Alternative C in the future. I just don't think it's the best option in this case.
Thanks, Chris. Other thoughts? Because we're going to need some action here to relay our design preference to staff. Pepe, go ahead.
I am still here.
Oh, Andy. Okay, thanks. Good.
I think that option B is what makes the most sense for me too. I agree with Chris. But on top of that, I would say I think it also what Harold was asking is probably a good idea to have the parking on the side of the sidewalk. I think that, like Chris said, I was also thinking this is not the case of a, through street with potential speeding where you want to keep people walking away from traffic necessarily, but I feel like it still adds a certain layer of, safety protection, and also maybe even works connecting with what Robbie was saying. It works with making sure that if people living there that are now in charge of clearing snow there, if they are parking at all or they have their visitors parking there, then they will have an extra incentive. Not that they can do it, but they will have an extra incentive to keep that clean and available and accessible, because people will park there and get off their vehicles and get on the sidewalk. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Kind of combining the best of all worlds. But I'm happy to hear what others say.
Thanks, Pepe. Is that all you had then? Okay. Harold, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my thoughts are, I appreciate creative thinking, and just because something is unique doesn't mean it's bad. Sometimes it's good to actually come up with something that hasn't really been done elsewhere. In this case, it seems to be kind of a solution in search of a problem, so it doesn't really seem to solve anything, and it does possibly come with some trade-offs. So I think option C, to me, just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Would it be an awful solution? Probably not. I'm not really worried about people parking on there or leading to speeding, because again, it's a cul-de-sac with low volumes, not much parking pressure, so it probably would be just fine. And I think in general, this project, it's a small project. It's not nearly as consequential as something like Region, so that's maybe an argument for some experimentation. But yeah, I think option C to me just doesn't make sense. In terms of options A and B, I think option A does have the advantage of having an actual terrace between the sidewalk and the road, which is helpful for snow clearing, which is helpful for separating people walking, as Jakovic said, and people driving. But again, it's not a high volumes fast street, so maybe this is not as important. in terms of parking, looking at Google Street View, looking at some other imagery providers, parking utilization seems to be really, really low. And I understand, staff, that no matter how low the parking utilization is, if you would remove all parking, there would be people who show up here, who show up at the Board of Public Works, who would complain about that. And so I understand the intuition to be like, well, maybe we just include one side of parking, which I think there's not huge downsides to having that in option B. But yeah, I think the additional terrace space in option A would make me lean toward a slight preference for that. I think the other thing is there's just going to be less impermeable surface, which is good for stormwater management. It's just less asphalt. It's probably going to be slightly cheaper to build and maintain. And finally, I guess one big concern I have with option C is like the setting of precedent of people don't like to clear sidewalks in front of their houses, especially if they didn't have a sidewalk before. And I think we have to be really careful. We have a city policy that we have sidewalks and that generally property owners are required to clear those sidewalks. And so making these case-by-case exceptions, I think, leads us down a dangerous path, especially when sidewalk clearing operations are funded through the operating budget. And we all know operating budget dollars are scarce, and Streets does a great job of getting the most out of those dollars. And so just having this, let's say, random block added to their responsibilities just doesn't make sense to me. Thanks.
Thanks, Harold. Alder Oakridge, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I'm leaning towards option B. I think it makes sense. I will say, to add on to what Chris said, we have seen streets in other places that have been, mostly other countries, that have been designed with sort of this like sidewalk at street level, but they've been very intentionally designed that way. And I mean, specifically in Freiburg, we saw in the Vauban neighborhood, which is the neighborhood they're all very proud of. The neighborhood streets don't really have sidewalks. They're all built flat. They also don't have any parking. They do have space for like contractors or delivery vans or whatever to pull over to the side, but there's sort of this expectation that there is no long-term parking there. And so I think I would similarly like to see a design like this in the future. But for a lot of the reasons that other people have mentioned, I don't think it's right here.
Thanks, Alder. Other comments? I'll just say I also do appreciate staff's creativity in bringing forward alternative C. That option is intriguing, and I can see how it might work in certain places, but I would lean away from it just because of the precedent setting and because of the comments that other people have made. Between option A and B, I lean slightly toward A just because of the terrace, but it is a narrow terrace. And it sounds like there would be snow clearing issues with option B, as was discussed, although potentially moving the parking to the same side of the street with the sidewalk might help with that, as Harold had said. So I really don't have strong feelings either way, other than leaning away from option C. So is anybody willing to make a motion? Harold.
Can I ask a question? So this, I think it was billed as review and feedback, but then the presentation also had a piece in there about reclassifying the street type, which I guess is a more formal action. Are we doing that now? Would the motion need to include that, or?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my intention was to get review feedback and, have the commission, recommend an alternative so we can move forward with board council and design and get it out for bid to start in the spring.
Yeah, the title of the item is review, feedback, and approval. But your question is a good one. Do you actually need approval from us to change the street type from neighborhood street to neighborhood yield street as well
sorry.
as the option?
No, that's a good point. So option A and B, actually, those meet complete green streets. So then I guess we do not, right?
Yes.
Ashley? Yep. Okay. So sorry. Yeah. To clarify, then we would not need, an approval. Just, I think the commission seems some want A and some want B. So I think it'd be further discussion with traffic engineering on, what we think maybe the best option is, A or B.
Yeah, and the commission does have the ability to make a motion on any item that's on the agenda, if they choose. So, but I'll come back to you in a second, Chris, but Andy, I don't think you answered the question or I missed it. Do we need a motion to change the street type from neighborhood street to neighborhood yield street?
I don't think so, because since we're following the guide,
Okay.
we do change street types, and these are just neighborhood streets. So I guess I haven't specifically in the past, as long as we're following the guide. Obviously, option C is unique and is probably not really in the guide, which is why we kind of wanted to point it out. If we were just doing A or B, we probably wouldn't have needed to come to the commission. Or maybe we did, because we're only putting sidewalk on one side. So that, I guess that is also unique, is we're not doing it on both.
Okay, I didn't recall us having to have this discussion about changing the street type. So thanks for that clarification. Chris?
I can make a motion. I'm not convinced we got clarity on that last question. So I'm going to move that we recommend reclassifying the street as a neighborhood yield street, recommend alternative B, and advise staff to consider putting parking on the opposite side than they have. I don't think we're recommending one side or the other, though.
I'm writing, just 1 second. So recommend reclassifying the street as a neighborhood yield street, approve option B, and recommend moving the parking to this. Can you finish that into the same side of the street as the sidewalk, Chris?
I think just consider moving parking to the same side as the sidewalk.
Okay, thank you. Consider moving the parking to the same side as the sidewalk. I'll read it again and you can tell me if I got it. What I have is recommend reclassifying the street type as a neighborhood yield street, approve option B, and consider moving the parking to the same side of the street as the sidewalk. How's that?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Is there a second? Bill?
I second Chris's.
Okay. There's a motion and a second. Chris, did you wish to speak to your motion?
No, thank you.
Okay. Comments? Discussion? You see no hands. I'll read it again. Recommend reclassifying the street type as neighborhood yield street. Approve option B and consider moving the parking to the same side of the street as the sidewalk. Any further discussion? I'm going to try and assume a unanimous consent vote. If anybody wants a roll call vote or wishes to abstain, please raise your hand. Or wishes to oppose, please raise your hand. Okay, I'm seeing no hands. Very good, thanks. A very interesting alternative, and we, as noted by many people, we appreciate staff's creativity in bringing us option C, and people have encouraged you to continue that same creativity. So even though we didn't move forward with that, we do appreciate it. So thanks so much.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thanks. All right, so we'll move on to item 4, no right on red, review and discussion. Aiden, do we have anybody registered to speak on item 4?
We do. We have a few.
Okay, all right. So why don't we get a presentation, Tom, and then we will hear from the public, and then we'll hear from commission members and alders.
All right. Hi, everyone. Here to talk about no turn on red. So these are the 2 signs that we use. I'll just go through the presentation here real quickly. I've just got an outline about what we're going to talk about today. Purpose of the presentation, history, look at some studies, the federal standards, look at what other cities are doing, and then we'll get specific to Madison. So the purpose of this presentation is just to provide some background and summarize the research and review our use of no turn on red, and then discuss the future use. This came up with the addition of a lot of signs that went in a couple of years ago. We've been wanting to have this as an agenda item for a while, kind of been waiting for a lighter agenda. So tonight is the night. But first, and I know you all know this, but maybe just for anyone reviewing this, I want to go through the importance of no turn on reds. So in this scenario, at a signalized intersection, and this is Prairie and Raymond, which we talked about in depth a while back. Some of you may remember. So in this situation, at a signalized intersection, when a driver is approaching a red light, their focus is to the left to look for gaps in oncoming traffic. At the same time, a pedestrian in the sidewalk has the walk light. So the conflict is a driver not paying attention to pedestrians or directly in front of them or to the right because they're looking left for gaps in traffic to turn right. That's different from when the driver has the green light. There's still a pedestrian conflict, but the driver's attention is in that direction of the pedestrian. So just a little bit of history here. And sorry for all the words on the screen, but I thought this was important to go through. Pre-1960s, right on red was prohibited everywhere. But then in 1973, with the energy crisis, allowing right turns on red was a way to reduce fuel consumption. So it was FHWA guidance to encourage states to allow right turns on red. And then by the 80s, right on red was legal in all 50 states. And there were some studies that we'll get into, but studies showed some increase in pedestrian conflicts, but improved vehicle operations and reduced delay. So today, the policy is the standard in the United States, except in a few places like New York City and some urban downtowns where there are blanket bans. And then the modern debate today, this has come up more with Vision Zero, pedestrian safety being a focus of cities, and then kind of balancing traffic efficiency versus safety. You know, back in the 70s, 80s, vehicles were a lot less fuel efficient. That was more of a concern, you know, especially with the energy crisis. But then internationally, a lot of countries never went to allowing right on red. So many in Europe. For studies, the big study was in 1982. That's the only peer-reviewed before-after crash study. Kind of along the way, FHWA has concluded that right turns on red create a small but measurable pedestrian safety concern. There is crash modification factors for allowing right turns on red, saying that pedestrian crashes may increase by 40 to 100%. But modern research relies on observations, so conflicts rather than crashes. So a conflict would be observing the right turn and maybe someone starts to turn right and has to stop abruptly to avoid striking a pedestrian, things like that. Because it's such a low speed movement, a lot, it's got to be a pretty bad crash for it to be reported. So there's a lot of conflicts that don't get reported. So it's hard to do studies on this, basically. I think the best study that's recent that I could find was in Connecticut. The state kind of did an overall study to evaluate using turns on red or allowing right turns on red. They found that the effectiveness varied by location, and the strongest benefit was where pedestrian volumes were high. They did not recommend a blanket ban on right turns on red, so they recommended more targeted use and emphasis on pedestrian safety. So a lot of stuff that is pretty intuitive. But then kind of just the research that the 80s documented the increased pedestrian conflicts. In the 90s, was focused on high pedestrian areas, and now today, more recent, with Vision Zero, it's focusing, less on crashes, more on conflicts. And so we can kind of think of different tiers of uses of no turn on red. So the top tier would be New York City. So that's where it's just not allowed anywhere. I don't think it's signed. It's just a thing that's, a ban throughout the city. And then there are area bans, like downtown districts, campus areas. Ann Arbor has that, Atlanta, Cambridge, and some of San Francisco. And then just some places just have policies that encourage the use of no turn on red. So in those cases, it's kind of the default is to lean towards no turn on red and then have a reason for allowing right turns on red rather than the other way around. And then the majority of the United States is location specific, and that includes us. So this is where we look at each location and identify whether restricting right turns on red is appropriate. So there is federal guidance on this recently with the updated manual for uniform traffic control devices. This is kind of the document that we use for a lot of the signs, restrictions in streets. So the first one is separated bike lanes. So in this case, right turns on red would be restricted from the side street because that movement would be made at the same time that bicyclists would have the right of way. So in the case where the bike facility is separated, and they define that as tubular markers, raised islands, or parked vehicles, then you have to put in the no turn on red. So that doesn't apply to the main street turning across it because they would both have the right of way at the same time. It applies to the side street when they have the red and the bike has the green. The other instance that the MUTCD calls out is where there are two-stage bike boxes. And you can kind of make sense that, if in this case, the side street from this side is turning right on a red, there could be a bicyclist in the left turn bike box waiting there. So that would be a conflict. A lot of the MUTCD calls out using engineering judgment. So it's a pretty vague term, but when we say engineering judgment, we're using pedestrian volumes, bicycle volumes, all these things to make that judgment call. So getting into some Madison specific things here. So some statistics for the 5-year crash history. Just to give context of how many crashes there are, you can see that right turn on red crashes are rare. We've had 14 with a ped bike within the past 5 years. And kind of like I mentioned before, the number of conflicts we would expect to be much higher than 14, but since conflicts aren't reported, crashes are reported, it's got to be a pretty serious crash for that to happen. And then this is just some statistics in more detail regarding those crashes. So kind of on the left side is whether it was on the type of control, whether it was a right turn on red or a right turn on green. And then on the right side, it was the severity of the injury in the crash. So here's the 14. So these are 14 crashes with a ped bike, reportable crashes that were an allowed right turn on a red. There were 3 crashes at a restricted right turn on red, and I think all 3 of these were from North Shore turning right onto John Nolan Drive. And then there's also crashes with right turn on green. So it's not that the right turn on the green eliminates the possibility for a crash. There are still crashes, but what we're worried about is the higher severity crashes where, like we went through with Prairie and Raymond, a driver is looking left and just doesn't see and pedestrian, and it can be a bad crash, which that one was a fatality. So kind of bringing this back to why we're here, we installed quite a few of these restrictions with BRT. So part of the BRT design, and in that contract, the design team restricted right turns on any crosswalk where it's going directly to the BRT station. So in this case, it would be these 2 turns. Those were planned as part of the design, so it wasn't based off of observations. It was just part of the planning process. So that included a lot of restrictions on East Washington Avenue and Mineral Point Road. Those all went in fall 2024, and that's when we started to get, questions. There's more. There's a couple of news stories about it. Just all the new restrictions that had popped up at that time. At the same time, the side path went in on Mineral Point Road. So for that, additional restrictions were also installed. So in this case, this is kind of what I was pointing out before with the MUTCD calling out restrictions for right turn on red with a separated bike facility. In this case, these were installed because with the signal timing phasing, person on the path would get the leading pedestrian interval. So they would have the right of way to move across or start moving into the crosswalk before drivers on Mineral Point Road get the green. So a right turn on red could conflict with a pedestrian or bike in the crosswalk. So these were also installed at the same time, which I think Mineral Point Road was kind of the generator of a lot of questions from the public and complaints about additional restrictions. So then other reasons, we've got other locations. These are based off of specific requests, complaints that come in over the years. We've got locations for school areas, school walk routes, crossing guard locations, some heavy pedestrian locations or heavy bike locations, and then some with just operational issues. And we included this map of our inventory that shows kind of based off the color of the sign, the reason or the primary reason that they were installed. So I did include in Legistar a separate PDF of this so you can zoom in and kind of look around a little bit easier. And then this is just kind of our inventory of number of signs and how it breaks down by reason that they were installed. So for next steps, we want to continue to evaluate using engineering judgment, like we talked about. We think we can review some of the corridor-wide restrictions that were put in now based off of some observations. One of the things is using time of day restrictions. Maybe appropriate to do that in a few places. Some of the locations that were put in the signs were only put in on the near side of the intersection. We would go through and evaluate whether we think those restrictions should remain. If they should remain, then we would increase or add a sign to the far side. Sometimes the sign is just not in a great spot for visibility. So we'll review those for better sign placement to kind of increase, get better compliance. That's one of the things that we've noticed is that if it's only on the near side, people often drive past it. Compliance gets really low. But yeah, time of day restrictions, like we have around the outer loop, we'll look into that. And then just continue to balance the pedestrian safety and traffic operations when looking at these different locations. So that was all I had. Happy to take questions or discuss and get feedback.
Thanks, Tom. Let's go to the public comment first.
So first we have Nicholas Davies of Richard Street, supports and wishes to speak.
Thank you. Yeah, I think right on red is a dicey maneuver as the presentation described. You're supposed to be looking in two mutually exclusive directions at the same time, which is not actually possible. Whereas at a no turn on red intersection, I'm glad to just chill out for a few seconds until it's my turn to go. I wanted to address some of the perceived drawbacks of no turn on red. There was this idea that it's less needed in areas where there's less pedestrian and cyclist usage. But if the intersection is hostile, like, why do you think that is? I think of Gammon and Watts, for example, where there's a lot of destinations and a lot of residents in the area, but some of the right turn movements are so free-flowing that it's really challenging to cross there. There was also this idea that if no turn on red were over-applied, then compliance would decline. I have a couple problems with that. I mean, one, it lets criminals dictate city policy. It erases drivers' own agency in the matter. It makes their mistakes for them. But also, we hear that same kind of defeatism about things like speed limits too. They say like, oh, if you lower the speed limit, people are still gonna speed just as much as they do today. But the data doesn't bear that out. And I think the same thing could apply here, where speeders can't speed if there's someone in front of you who isn't speeding. The same would be true of no turn on red. If someone in front of you is respecting no turn on red, then you can't violate it either. And I see a potential tipping point here where today no turn on red isn't that common. So drivers don't generally expect it, which makes it really important, but also really challenging to catch their eye with the signage. Whereas if no turn on red becomes the norm, then that drivers will adjust to that. Their first instinct will be to stop and look for the signage and then proceed if there isn't any. So obviously signage isn't the only factor. Intersection design plays an important role too, like moving the stop line back, tightening turning radius, not giving right turns a designated lane when they don't need it. But signage alone even would be an incremental improvement. We're not on track to Vision Zero yet. And I think it's these incremental improvements that are gonna start getting us there, not just like a defeatist shrug in response to the challenge. Thank you.
Thanks for coming and sharing your thoughts. Does anybody have a question for the registrant? Okay, seeing no hands, thanks again for coming and sharing your thoughts. Who do we have next, Aiden?
Next, we have Gabriel Hill of Presidential Lane, neither supports nor opposes and wishes to speak.
Hello. I find myself mirroring Nicholas again, which he kind of took the words right out of my mouth. But yeah, I think in like an ideal world, we'd have a system that a lot of the European countries have. I mean, as we know, they have way safer roads, and having a system where it's like the norm is to stop on red. I mean, that it seems like something you shouldn't even have to say. Stop, like red means stop. But the norm should be like you don't go on red, and then there's a sign to be like, oh, you can turn on this red in these like the very unique situations where that should be allowed. I mean, are we going to get there? Like off just us in Madison? No, that's going to be a decades long thing to get to that point. But I think that just there's this idea that we should use them where they need to be used. But I think that it's better to overuse these signs than underuse them, because again, it's that habit. Like I find myself even, and I go to transportation commission meetings and I'm like very tuned into like safety, but even sometimes I find myself coming up to these no turn on reds and like, just because it's a habit, just like, oh, I start to almost go, but then I obviously don't. But I mean, there have been times where I have like turned right on red when it's like, oh, there's a sign there. So just having a citywide, like, oh, the norm is to stop on red. So even in these places where, sure, it might not be like the ideal place for a no turn on red sign, having one there to like establish that norm, I think would be better than just having like the very unusual, the no turn on reds being only used in like very specific cases. Yeah, I hope we see more of them. I think it's one of the biggest things you can do to make an intersection like safer, because it's like 60 to even 100% more dangerous for like certain users. So I think just the more no turn on red we can get in the city of Madison, the better. Thank you.
Thanks so much for your thoughts and comments. Does anybody have a question for the registrant? Okay, thanks again for coming and sharing your thoughts. Do we have anybody else, Aiden?
Yes, last we have Benjamin Wolma of North Lakewood Gardens, supports and wishes to speak.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Wonderful, I'd forgotten to plug my mic in. I'll try to be brief and not long-winded. I appreciate how surprisingly candid this presentation is, and I'm kind of curious who wrote it. I think since Madison has a Vision Zero action plan, and kind of sum it up on the international context slide that Tom decided not to finish reading. Some countries never adopted right on red, e.g. many in Europe. They prioritize pedestrian and cyclist safety over small fuel and time savings. So going down to the next steps, instead of prioritizing safety, Tom wants to continue evaluating requests using engineering judgment. In case any of the auditors or any other members of the commission are not familiar with the history of the Vision Zero action plan and Vision Zero generally, it exists because the engineering judgment that Tom wants to continue using literally kills people, almost 40,000 people a year in this country. So I hope that the commission will take this opportunity both to put forward a desire to implement no turn on red across the city and make it the norm, and also insist finally that traffic engineering actually take Vision Zero seriously and not just a tool to use grants. I absolutely applaud how good the mayor is at getting grant money, but Vision Zero needs to be a lot more than that. It needs to mean we're trying to save lives, not waiting for somebody else to die so we can do another half measure at the intersection where they died. The idea of time restrictions, I think, highlights the priorities even more. no one deserves to die just because they're going to work at 3 in the morning or 3:30 in the morning, like I was today. No one deserves to die because they're wanting to go down a lightly trafficked street with their brother to Culver's, like a girl was just killed in McFarland. So it's wonderful that this conversation is up here. And again, I applaud the accuracy of this presentation. I just vehemently disagree with the next steps, and I hope Traffic Commission will take this opportunity to disagree also. It's kind of disturbing that there's more concern, or seemingly more concern, about upsetting some homeowners about losing parking that they almost never use than there is concern about letting people continue to die on our streets, continuing to make our traffic system more complicated, as opposed to making it simpler and more consistent. I think it's also important that it's discussed how much conflict actually happens with no turn on red because of drivers pulling into crosswalks rather than stopping behind the white line. It's an understandable behavior. Vehicles behind assume that people are going to turn on red. You can't safely do it unless you're pulling up to the curb. Even in the example at Prairie Road in Raymond, it's obvious that no one's going to be turning safely on red if they're behind the white line. I very rarely see people stop at the white line. I've almost been hit running because of that behavior. Implementing no turn on red helps prevent those interactions. And that makes a really antagonistic confrontation not happen. I feel like it's too often forgotten that almost every interaction in the vehicle is literally life and death. Anytime that any of us hop in our car to go down the street, we're accepting the risk that we might kill somebody that day. That's just the basic truth of it. And I think it's important that we start designing our entire system to promote safety and to encourage compliance, not to risk upsetting some people or saving a few seconds of time for a few cents on fuel. Thank you.
Okay, that's your time. Thanks so much for coming and sharing your thoughts. Does anybody have a question for the registrant? Okay, seeing none. Aiden, do we have anyone else?
We do not know.
Okay, thank you. So comments or questions for Tom? Alder Olkovich.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Tom. I was wondering, I have a few questions, but to start with, I was wondering if you could talk about when you say a lot of these studies or decisions are based on conflicts, are they looking at actual conflicts that are occurring on streets, or are they just speculating?
Yeah, the studies with conflicts is observing. So that, yeah, that's why there really aren't very many studies on turning on red, because they're difficult. It takes a lot of time and resources to do them. So, and because the crashes, it's kind of two things, because the crashes are so rare, to get a good study would take a huge amount of time, like, 10 years before, 10 years after, and just no one does that. So they do the conflict studies where they actually observe and count the conflicts.
Okay. And then for my other question, there are spots that don't have no turn on red, but do have like essentially a right turn lane with a red arrow. And in those cases, is the expectation that you can turn right even if you have the red arrow?
Yeah, I was going to bring this up because that's a good question. So the good example of that in Madison is when you're on eastbound Johnson Street at First Street. So we've got the right turn signal head. So it's solid red, yellow, flashing yellow arrow, and then a green arrow. So there is a phase where this is just a solid red arrow. In Wisconsin, under a solid red arrow, you are allowed to turn right under that. So then there's another phase in this signal where the bikes have the light or the right of way. At that point, this sign lights up for a no turn or no right turn sign. So this is a very complicated intersection, and we do have compliance issues here. I think a lot of people just don't understand when am I allowed, when am I not. I don't know if we've done a specific study on the compliance rates. But another thing about compliance rates is you can have an overall good compliance rate with a bad compliance rate, meaning the only one allowed to turn that you can get really data on is the first person in the line. If the first person in line doesn't turn right, then the other ones behind them don't have the opportunity. So the overall compliance will be good. That's another thing just that muddies the studies on this. So you can kind of look at it in different ways, but yeah, this is kind of the issue is that there's kind of different signs to do, and if you really don't know, it's hard to know what to do as a driver.
Yeah, and one thing I live near an intersection that has a right turn lane it doesn't have the blank out sign, but it's got the red arrow for right turn, a sign guiding right turn actions. And I have seen instances where, well, like you said, a lot of times the car in front is just stopped at the red arrow, even if nobody's exactly crossing. I have even seen people get really frustrated and just drive around them and turn right in front of them too, which is scary, but okay, this is helpful though. And yeah, not sure how we educate drivers on some of these things.
Thanks, Alder. Alder Field, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, staff, for this presentation. I really like the ideas in this discussion, and what Alder Ohowitz just ended with is a great segue to my question. I'm wondering, Tom, if you know, or if the examples of other places that have done this provide us a roadmap for doing the public education component to get better compliance with no turn on red. And I'm wondering in particular about the notion of more no turn on reds in some parts of the city, but not everywhere, and how we manage that either in some sort of public messaging campaign or intentional signage. Any thoughts you could share would be helpful.
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's a good point. How important the public engagement is with this, with any sort of change. So that's, there's always the 3 E's of engineering, education, and enforcement. So we could do the engineering part, but the education and enforcement, and especially education, would have to be done along with that. And focusing on a certain area would make that easier as far as education and enforcement. So I think that's something for, we can go back and look into that further. We didn't do a lot of that. Ann Arbor is a good location because theirs is fairly recent in a downtown area where it's a limited area. Didn't get into what they're doing as far as public education and things like that. But that's something that we could look into, and that's kind of like the type of feedback we're hoping for tonight, is to kind of get your thoughts on that, what to look into further, what to focus on more for the future.
Yeah, I've been on both sides of right turns on red that have not been great safety situations, both as a driver and a passenger. So I think this is a great idea. Thank you.
Thanks, Alder. Harold, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Tom, for the presentation and all the research into that. And I think it's really good to not just have people's comments and thoughts and feelings, but actually getting some crash numbers. I think one thing that stood out to me, that crash modification factor saying 40 to 100% increase in pedestrian involved crashes with no turn on red. I mean, that's pretty big. I mean, it's hopefully from a low baseline, and yes, methodology problems and whatever, but I think for any kind of crash modification factor, that's pretty high. So I think that's good to keep in mind. Questions I have, one is a logistical question. So if we were to use one of those, I think you said tier 2 approaches where we take a specific area of town and like in that whole area, every signalized intersection would be no turn on red. Would we have to sign every single intersection, or is there, I guess that's regulated by state statute and MUTCD? And how do Ann Arbor, Atlanta, Cambridge do it? I mean, I lived in Montreal, where it's on the island of Montreal, so it's kind of neat. Like every bridge, as you enter the island, you have like no turn on red on the whole island, which we have an isthmus, but no island.
Yeah, that's a good question, especially for city attorney's office. I think, especially if we chose like a certain area, downtown campus type of thing, I think we would be looking at a lot of signs at the intersections. But yeah, that's also something that we can look into, exactly how that would be done. And yeah, I can get some more information on that, and we do kind of have the area signs for parking, but then we did end up signing every street for alternate side parking. So I think that might kind of give us a clue that we would probably end up putting in a lot of signs.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, 20 is plenty required a lot of signs, because that is something that you have to sign for it to be legally effective. So yeah, I think talking to the attorney's office, just see what our options are. I mean, I probably agree with you. Probably you do have to sign it, at least initially, everywhere, just for that education component. But I think it would be useful to know like what the legal requirements would be.
Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned that this item has been on our list of future agenda items forever, and so I think it dates back to the BRT, and where there was a whole lot of people upset and complaining. I'm just curious, has the number of people complaining changed over time? Like, is this, initially it's new, people complain, and now they kind of like, yeah, it's fine?
Yeah, the number of complaints have gone way down. Right. This was kind of one of the top issues when it first went in, but it definitely has gone down since then.
Okay. I suspected as much. I mean, I think that's just with any kind of change, people need to get used to it. Something is different. People will point that out in more or less polite ways. I guess a couple reactions. I mean, I think, looking into an area-based solution to me makes some sense, and downtown seems like the obvious one. I often find myself biking or walking through downtown and like, okay, this intersection does have it, does not have it, and thanks for the presentation of like the different scenarios. But just in terms of pedestrian volumes, like almost everywhere in the campus downtown areas, there's just always a lot of people walking. So I think that seems like the obvious location, and where exactly to draw the boundaries, I'm not totally sure, but I think that could be figured out. Time-based or conditional restrictions, I mean, I don't have data to back this up, but my sense is that these conditional or time-based signs, I mean, they obviously increase the complexity for the driver and the cognitive load of like, okay, between 6 in the morning and 6 in the evening, oh, is it 6:15 already? Like, it just adds another step that people have to think about, which I would expect, and kind of my perception is probably lowers compliance, where like, you come to this intersection, it's always, the rules are always the same. That probably makes it easier to follow those rules, would be my sense. Then the other part of that, I guess another perception thing that I don't have data on. My sense is that past 5 years, red light compliance is generally not improved and probably gotten worse. And I get the sense that this movement, like you are on the main street, you're about to make a right turn, the light turns, and it turned like 2 seconds before, but it's a intersection where right on red is allowed. People just make a turn at speed, like they don't come to a stop and then turn. I think that's become increasingly the norm, like the flying red turn, no matter what the light shows. And so I think it probably happens somewhat less frequently at no turn on red sign. And I see you're going to a slide where you maybe have some data on that.
Yeah, so I did check on that. So this is back from a 1985 study. This is kind of a interesting one where right turn on red is allowed. 57% of the drivers did not come to a complete stop. So yeah, it's exactly what you're saying.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's the scenario where like most of the time it's fine. But like if you're crossing that crosswalk, people just shoot by you even, it can't be good. So that's my feedback so far. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks, Harold. Alderfield?
Chair, that was left over from before.
Oh, okay. Your hand was still up. Robbie, go ahead.
Hi. I don't actually have a question. Are we on discussion?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. First of all, I would just like to say, as someone who uses the BRT and other buses and a bicyclist and a pedestrian, I am a huge fan of no right turn on red. I also observe as a driver, a lot of people and other modes as well, a lot of people violating it, but that's a tougher nut to crack. One of the reasons that I really like no right turn on red is that it, in at least sometimes, gets people to actually stop. Even if they violate turning on the red, they stop before they make the turn. And again, that first car in line, as you mentioned, can be a block on other people's bad behavior. I see so many people who either stop in the crosswalk when they're planning on making a right on red, which means if there's anybody using the crosswalk or about to use the crosswalk, that's incredibly dangerous. Not to mention inconvenient if you're just trying to get across. But no right turn on red maybe deters a little bit of that behavior. And it makes them think that they have to take another beat before they make the turn. So I don't know how you get the word out. Maybe traffic engineering should have a PR wing that sends information to the or the police department. Somebody, should suggest a story or pitch a story or write across a press release to the newspapers and the podcasts and that kind of thing, because I think a lot of people both misunderstand why no right turn on red is implemented and what they're supposed to do, and when they're allowed to turn on red and where they're supposed to stop, for crying out loud. I mean, I cannot tell you how many people I've practically wanted to bang on the hood of their car and tell them, you're in the crosswalk, dude. There's a bunch of people trying to cross and you almost hit me because you were looking to the left when you're making your right without stopping before you get in the crosswalk. So I'm just going to say that I think it's a good thing. I would not favor reducing the use of it, even though the compliance is sometimes not ideal. I think it does, just having the signs up there maybe makes people think about it, and maybe over time will increase compliance and looking for pedestrians. But I don't know, maybe we need to get some stories out into the press to tell people why we're doing it and what it means. And because I've seen people say, why did they put up the right turn on red on Mineral Point Road? I'm like, well, I could tell you, but you won't listen to me. So, you know, I mean, I'm not going to engage people on Nextdoor. So it might help to have city staff quoted in the paper on that subject. So, but thank you for bringing this up, and I hope that we see more of it. Thanks.
Thanks, Robbie. Harold, go ahead.
Two more things. I mean, I think, the enforcement angle is important, and this is maybe a plea to the Common Council members on the commission. A reminder that the Vision Zero Action Plan has an item on lobbying at the state for allowing automated enforcement as part of the Vision Zero Action Plan. I think the Common Council recently had a presentation of legislative priorities or lobbying, whatever priorities, and that was not on there. So I think it might be good to ask about that. And then the other piece that I think is important for the commission and for the public to keep in mind, I think Madison has done a really, really good job with signal operations, where in some places, signal cycles are really long, which I think exacerbates this urge to if you have to wait at a signal for 2 minutes, it's all clear, nobody's there, and you have that no turn on red sign, then probably compliance is pretty low. Whereas here, signal cycles are often pretty short, so you don't have to wait terribly long. And if you do have to wait, then usually that's because there's actually conflicting traffic. So I'm thinking of the intersection of University Bay Drive and University Avenue, where you have that slip right turn lane where people do go with the no turn on red sign, but they can't go because there's too much traffic on University Avenue. So you don't actually even would have any operational benefit from getting rid of that no turn on red sign. People would just sit in the middle of the crosswalk, couldn't go anyway until they actually have the light. So I think shout out to traffic engineering for optimizing a lot of those signal operations. And again, that I think is a good argument for then having the no turn on red. If it doesn't benefit, getting rid of it benefits anybody anyway. Thank you.
Thanks, Harold. Pepe, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks, Tom, for the presentation. And a little bit of history. Personally was really curious about this because coming from Chile, a country that does not have this, has never had it, and in fact, it's quite the opposite. You have to always, you can never turn right on a red light unless there is a sign with a green arrow saying you can turn with precaution. It's kind of like a yield plus a turn. And I think there's a handful, maybe less than 5 in the whole city of Santiago with 8 million people, so you can imagine it's not a very popular option. And it's also an environment where there's lots of pedestrians, people biking everywhere. You have, of course, train stations and a lot more complexities than here. So I never actually sat down and thought of the reasoning or the history behind it. And kind of coming from there and knowing that that's possible. I mean, I hear the argument about compliance, that is valid, but at the same time, sometimes, I was trying to think it from the opposite lane and think, well, at least when people are driving, or this is what happens to me when I drive, if I'm confused, I tend to slow down and stop. If I don't know what the right thing is to do, is I react that way. And I would hope more, a lot of people react that way. So when there is a lot of instructions, or let's say the case of depending what time, and after 6 a.m. or what the case that Harold was mentioning, I would hope that when people are confused, they would opt to do the safest thing. Now, I'm not sure data will back that up. But yeah, I mean, all this to say, I think cultural changes take time. And I think we're in the right direction with applying the no turn on red in different places where it makes the most sense now. And eventually, you know, as we build more main streets where people are going to be walking a lot and, you know, and shopping and more present by foot and by bike, I think I'm hoping that we can make this no right turn on red more common and something that people can actually expect as generations pass and grow. You know, change is slow, but it does happen. So I'm hopeful and I'm appreciative of this effort. And I really hope to see more of these signs around so people can start getting more used to them and continue to respect and wait. And of course, I mean, Robbie, I feel like probably all of us have been there where people don't even stop at all to begin with. So I think it's a slow change moving in the right direction. So I appreciate this presentation and all the efforts done. Thank you.
Thanks, Pepe. Alder Olkovich, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I really appreciate everyone's comments. And I just want to add in addition, like, I am supportive of no right on red, especially downtown where we have a lot of pedestrians, but anywhere where we have even a moderate amount of people walking, I think it's probably a more appropriate treatment than we're giving it right now. And I did just want to add on, like, in terms of when we apply this treatment, because I was just looking at the recommendations and I saw that one of them was like consider time of day as appropriate. And I would really like, if we're going to go that route, I almost feel better about having like a blank out sign and educating people on the blank out sign than having a sign that says like from, like we have on the square that I think it's 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. I don't remember the exact times, but on top of that, I would prefer just a no right turn on red. And like if we're considering having no right turn on red during the middle of the day, but on the evenings, then maybe just shortening signal times or cycle times for signals in the evenings over having like an exception period. That's just my personal preference.
Thanks, Alder. Other comments? Yang, go ahead.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks everyone. I just want to thank the Commission, for the very thoughtful guidance and a discussion on this topic. As Tom mentioned, that they were being thinking about this for a long time. We got especially after the BRT project, we got so many complaints from the public about that, but we did push on. And we think that the science has a lot of value, and we do want to do more and do more mindfully. But one thing we do want to avoid is some what happened in some of the communities who are proceeding with this with a very good attention, but got stuck. Such as you may know, what happened in Washington D.C. Their program basically was put on hold. So we want to find a way forward, but move forward mindfully. I also want to thank Commissioner Olsen for actually inviting us to go to the Disability Rights Commission, talk about this and other topics. I want to report back that we got a lot of really good discussion from there as well, and a lot of really good guidance. So. These are all these input are very helpful and really help us to think what's best for our community and put together a plan forward on this. So thank you.
Thanks, Yang. I'm hearing a lot of support for no turn on red. I personally am also supportive of that. And there's a lot of discussion about education. And, Tom, you talked about maybe looking into what some other cities have done, because I think that's a key. I think it's a very difficult thing to figure out how to do. But I think that's important. And I also heard a number of people talk about, maybe moving forward on some area-based no turn on red like downtown. So moving forward mindfully, as you said, Yang, but I think we'd like to have you come back and talk to us some more about this. And if I could just make another comment about education. I've brought this up before, but we can't seem to educate people not to speed. We're trying, but people speed. I walk a lot in the neighborhood, and I cannot tell you the number of times I'm crossing a street in a very well marked crosswalk, and the cars coming at me don't even slow down. Not only do they not stop, they don't even slow down. So people don't understand what that means. So I'm very interested in how do we educate people in the community about, complying with no turn on red, that you have to stop. If you're going to turn on red where you can, you need to stop before you do it. You need to stop at crosswalks when people are in them. So I don't know how we do that, but we're here to support traffic safety and protect the most vulnerable users of our transportation systems. And, education is, I understand it's really hard, but anything that you can find out about, other places who've been successful with ways to do that, I would appreciate hearing about it. Alder Figueroa-Cole, go ahead.
Thank you. Late for the party here, but so I'm just going to focus on the last statement there. I mean, I kind of wonder what is the budget for marketing, because I think we all know. I mean, I think that where the education component needs to be focused on safety and the impact of the lack of safety, not so much on slowing down, not so much about slowing down, but what the negative impact has in changing people's lives, like when someone gets, hurt or killed or whatever. Like, I feel like we are at that point that we need to be very, very direct about that. But I am unclear when it comes to our city budget, what funding do we have for a campaign that we can run, commercials, that we can be on the news channels, that we can be in Instagram, Facebook, and be on people's providing that marketing via those different methods. Do we even have a budget for that?
I can give a first take on that. That's a really good question, Alder. So thank you for that question. The short answer to that is, right now we have a very, very limited funding specifically for that. So we have been, trying to kind of squeeze things, find opportunities to do a few things, such as you might have seen those ads on the buses. Also having staff going out to neighborhood events such as Parks and Lives, Safety Saturday, to engage and educate the public. We also were able to buy some small amount of materials that we gave out to people, just trying to have the idea, traffic safety, the culture stick with them. But we definitely need to do more. And right now we have quite limited funding on that. We have explored, some options. But right now, for Safe Streets Madison, for example, that's an infrastructure focused program. And there's still a long list, almost 700 projects waiting. Really hard for us to, fund this through that program when that's in high demand. And the operating budget, as you know, that has been very tough for our city in the last few years. But But looking forward to work with the others, the commission, for some opportunity. I know that this is very important to the mayor as well. So hopefully we can develop something and do more education. Thank you.
And so the follow-up question on that, are there or have you explored any possibilities for grants for that specific purpose to create marketing campaigns for transportation? Or, like you have, there are big organizations that deal with this issue, that you have websites and they have all that data or whatever. Is there a room for partnership with those organizations to help us create the campaigns? Like I go back to the thing that we do every year for Wear Orange for gun violence, and we partner, Public Health is partnering with Moms Against gun violence, and they are a national organization, but we partner with them and they help with the marketing and things like that. Have we explored those venues? Because again, I agree with everything you guys are saying, but I think we need the money to make that communication be effective, and we obviously don't have enough of that. So have that venue been explored of partnering with a national org?
Yeah, thank you. So yes, we have been exploring a couple of things. One is through federal grants. So we were able to actually build into some of those projects with our federal grant applications, and we've been doing some of them. But oftentimes that we have to be very competitive. So typically that's a kind of a smaller portion of those grant applications. But one federal grant we got, for example, funds one of our positions in traffic engineering that provides a lot of pedal bike education. So that's definitely safety. So we actually been doing a lot of work at the schools, elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, engaging and educating students. So we're actually doing a lot of work through that grant. We are also collaborating with we haven't really done a lot with national organizations for the safety campaign, but we are collaborating with some local organizations, such as Dane County Traffic Safety Commission, and some of the organizations on the Vision Zero Stakeholder Task Force. So they are helping us, getting the words out, such as safer communities. But again, I think they also have limited funding. So we are facing a common challenge.
Okay. Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Alder. Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Great conversation. I mean, I guess two thoughts regarding the education and publicity for it. I mean, I think that could be an argument for having an area-based approach. So I'm thinking, say whatever area of downtown we implement that, it would be a big change, similar to 20 is plenty. I think, with the restrictions that went up for BRT, the focus was on the BRT because that was the important part and was kind of a side effect. But if the city were to say like, hey, in downtown, we're doing this for pedestrian safety, you can explain the reasoning, it would get a lot of attention. Maybe that would be a cheap and effective way to raise awareness for that. I think one thing to look into that's not on the city side, but exploring with others, I don't know what driver's education does, how much of it even still exists, how well no turn on red is covered there. Maybe just, and I don't know, that's probably under DMV jurisdiction, maybe just looking into if there's something that could be strengthened there at the state level. And then the last thing, I mean, as you keep exploring this, just thinking about the impact on people on bikes. I often find myself at intersections that are signed no turn on red, and I feel really silly standing there on my bike because, I mean, maybe this is my bias, but I don't think me turning would be a real safety issue. So I think some other states solve that by having what is commonly referred to the Idaho stop law, where you can treat a stoplight like a stop sign, so you come to a stop and continue. But yeah, that's just, say if we were to implement that in all of downtown, what would that mean? Would we care about compliance? Is there some solution? Could we signal no turn on red except bicycles? Is that even an option? That's just, I mean, I think it's a pretty minor component of it, but I think it's good to keep in mind. Thank you.
Thanks, Harold. Bill, go ahead.
Thanks, Ann. Yeah, Tom, I like the map that you prepared that gives you a big overall picture on where you have currently have signs. And I think I'd really support if you take a look at that and see if there's an area that you can fill in the blanks, if you will, fill the gaps and do those in the first, and then to see if it, with the limited funds that you have for signing, to expand into an area. But I think to define that area, I think, you know, you've already got areas that you've that you know where the signs are. Well, are there streets that are nearby that don't have them for whatever reason? And maybe that would be a good place to start to, if I say, fill in the gaps. So I'd be supportive of that approach.
Thanks, Bill. Other comments or questions? Lynn, I want to thank you for the idea of putting this on the agenda. Really, really excellent. Great discussion. And clearly everybody wants to hear more about it. So Tom and Yang, thanks so much. And understanding the financial restrictions that we have. Appreciate the creativity that you've used to figure out ways to further education. So yeah, whenever you have the opportunity to come back and speak to us some more about heading in the direction of supporting more no turn on red, which is what I'm hearing from people, and perhaps the best way to accomplish that. Other comments? Bill, is your hand up again or no? Okay. Other
Sorry.
comments?
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Yeah, I was trying to put it down, but I couldn't get it to work. Yang, go ahead.
Yeah, another thing I want to mention very quickly, hopefully you will start to see them more and more. You know, we have a wonderful Vision Zero intern, Ben. So he has, one of his tasks has been creating quite a few different educational signs, you know, for different treatments, like RFB, like islands, like a protected bike lanes. So he has been, so these are very cheap practical signs, and he has been installing them all around the city. So, you know, every week there are more. So hopefully, you know, this provides a cost-effective way for us to get the, you know, the message out, you know, one, educate users about what this is. Our users that, you know, these devices are here for a reason, to improve safety. So hopefully that will be happy, and hopefully you will be starting notice some of those. And I will talk to him to see whether we can create something for low turn on red as well.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. We'll look forward to hearing some more from you on this topic. Great. Okay, can we move on to reports from other boards, committees, and commissions? Does anybody have anything for us this evening? Harold, go ahead.
Super short. Board of Public Works took the Park Street jurisdictional transfer item out of order because time pressure, and it was unanimously approved just as it was here. That's
great. Thanks. Chris, go ahead.
Thanks. I probably should have given folks advance notice, but I am no longer on the Plan Commission. I just wanted to be able to give this commission the attention that I would like to, and it was becoming a lot. So my last meeting was a couple weeks ago. Alderfield can probably speak to this, but I assume he's satisfying the crossover expectation, at least until his term ends in April.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Alderfield, go ahead.
Yes, Chair, thanks. Just briefly, I am indeed fulfilling the crossover position now. I don't have new news yet, but I'll bring any updates from the Plan Commission relevant over here as we have meetings. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any other updates? Okay, I don't have any announcements tonight. In terms of future agenda items, for the July 29th meeting, we have a Metro Transit accessibility update, a very popular topic. So I expect that we'll have hear from the public on that and have some good conversation. We have a Metro Transit public hearing at 6 o'clock. New and updated service standards, processes for making service changes, processes and standards related to placements of bus stops, shelters, benches, and other amenities. So that public hearing is also scheduled at 6 o'clock on the 29th. Perry Street Connection Study, UW Research Park 2 paths, excuse me, that's hard to say, paths, and the Department of Transportation Annual Operations Report. There may be a couple of parking things, but I suspect that those may be pushed forward. And I've moved some other stuff off to August because that's a lot already. So we want to try and manage our agendas to keep them reasonable. So anybody have any other items that they'd like to see? And just as a point, in terms of the no right on red, I have that under future agenda items as something that was brought forward by the commission. And once we talk about something, I usually cross it off, but I think I'm just going to leave that one on there because I think that's something that we want to see come back from time to time. So I don't think we want to let it go off the radar. So everybody in favor, everybody got a thumbs up on that? Yeah. So we'll expect to see that back then. Anybody have anything else for future agenda items? Okay. All right. I need a motion to adjourn. Carl.
Move adjournment.
Can we get a second? Chris. And Alder Olkovich and Robbie. We have lots of seconds. So we have a motion and a second, and I am assuming unanimous consent. And thanks so much. A great conversation again, as always. Thanks so much for your active participation. And we'll see you next time. Thanks.